Welcome to this short video where we'll be looking at the different approaches for assessing risk when looking at the life cycle of your Cisco products and solutions. This video is part of an overall series of videos which looks at the overall topic of lifecycle management for Cisco products. If you haven't already, please check out the first and second video in this series. The first, which looks at the key lifecycle milestones that Cisco announces for their products and solutions, and the second, which looks at where we can source data for use in lifecycle management. In our previous video, we looked at the various sources of data that we can use to be able to create a unified lifecycle management data view of our Cisco products and solutions. So let's look a little bit more carefully now about how we can look at this data from different perspectives to gain an understanding of the risk that we carry in our Cisco network and our Cisco products. So we're going to be introducing the concept of lenses. Think of as a lens as something that you put over your unified LCM data that allows you to look at it from a particular perspective or particular context. And today we're going to be talking about three primary risk concepts or risk lenses that you can apply to unified LCM data to reveal from different contexts where you carry risk. And that is customer risk, vendor risk, and organizational risk. So let's begin with the customer risk lens. Now, with the customer risk lens, what we're doing is looking at our unified LCM data, which represents our Cisco products and solutions, and assessing them as it relates to customer-specific policies. Now, usually, this is done at an architecture or a product family level, and it could well be aligned to security, business, or financial requirements. And we can look at it from different perspectives. For example, we might look at the risk that we're carrying in our switching fabric, or the risk that we're carrying in our data centers, or compute nodes. We might look at it from risk as we are carrying as it relates to security, or indeed as we look at unified collaboration. And in this case, we also need to look at deployment risk, especially for organizations that might have once made a large purchase that will all become eligible for replacement at one particular time in the future. Now, the next lens we can utilize is the vendor risk lens, and this is often useful when there is no customer policies in place, and so we can't really get a good view of the risk we're carrying as it relates to existing established policies within the customer organization. And specifically with this lens, we're utilizing each of the milestones that Cisco declares along the life cycle of their products. And if you want to know more about this, please go back to the 101 video in this series, which talks about the 8 key milestones that Cisco declares across the life cycle of their products. But at minimum, what we want to do with this lens is look at when the end of sale happens, and from that, when the last day of support happens, and we track this very carefully. As end of sale is a leading indicator that signifies that last day of support, or LDOS, will happen within 5 years. And the last day of support is the end state when there is no further support from Cisco or the vendor on the device. And when that happens, risk increases significantly as support is no longer available from the vendor. Now, the final lens that we primarily use is the organizational risk lens. And the organizational risk lens really looks at the natural risk inherent as we traverse each of the Cisco lifecycle milestones. And this really begins at the end of sale point or the end of sale milestone. Now, at that point, there's limited risk at end of sale, but it increases there on out as we approach the last day of support or LDOS. Now, as we approach LDOS, the first major milestone that we trip across is the end of native operating system support. And at this point, operational risk does increase as fixes and patches may well only come with new operating system versions for devices that are currently deployed in the network. The next major milestone that we come across where we see an increase in operational risk is the end of new service contract. And again, this is, if you want to know more about this, please go back to our 101 video. But at this point here, our ability to add new service contracts to our Cisco products and solutions end. So along with financial risk, we also get devices that are not covered at this date and are not eligible for technical support and therefore increase the organizational and operational risk. And then finally, the major milestone that we cross where we see significant increase in risk is that last day of support or LDOS date. At this point, we have security, operational, and financial risk as we no longer get to enjoy vendor support for that particular version of the product or solution. So in summary, the overall goal of lifecycle management is to understand the efficiency between asset lifecycle costs and risk that the organization occurs. So we're trying to optimize this particular ratio. And in order to realize this particular goal and manage that risk, we need to evaluate risk from a number of different perspectives. whether that's internal customer risk based on existing policies, or whether it's vendor risk, or indeed whether it's organizational risk as well. Now, things can get a little complicated from here on out, as managing all this data and all these different lenses and perspectives of the data can be complex. However, when done correctly, the ability to make decisions and manage risk becomes a process and something codified and routinized within your organization, rather than a process of guessing or putting your finger in the air and sort of getting a gut feeling for the risk that you're carrying on your Cisco products, solutions, and network. We hope you enjoyed this video looking at the various approaches you can take to assess risk on your network infrastructure and Cisco products and solutions. Again, if you haven't had a chance, please check out the 101 and 201 videos. And finally, look forward to our next video, where we're going to be looking at some other things you can do once you have this rich source of data around the life cycles of your Cisco products and solutions, and some of the other very interesting and important use cases that we can apply this data and process and methodology to. Thank you for your time.